Well, it's 12 noon on September 7th, 2021. This is a regular assembly meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk?
Taylor,
Excused. He may call in at some point when you get cell service.
Chelsea,
Here.
Bob,
Excused.
Jeff,
Here.
David,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Mark,
Here. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we get started and go any further, I'd just like to make sure everybody's got their cell phones turned off, and it's a policy that we don't text during the meeting. If an assembly member has an emergency phone call or text, it'd be nice if they would step outside and take that. So anyway, it's time for approval of minutes. Regular assembly meeting minutes from August 9th, 2021, and regular assembly meeting minutes from August 16th, 2021. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes unless there's a change necessary.
Moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approval of the minutes for those dates, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, they're approved. Brings us to item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda in front of us today. Is there any amendments? Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I'd like to amend under discussion items. I have a community housing discussion item, and I'd like to move that to item A before comments and recognitions.
Okay, remind me when we get there, but that should be easy. Is there any other amendments for today's meeting? Everybody in favor of moving forward as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move forward as presented. Public hearings. This is a public hearing for ordinance 2021-13. This is an ordinance amending section 3.08.080 of the municipal code entitled Quorum and Voting Requirements to allow assembly members' participation by teleconference to be counted for purposes of determining a quorum. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak during this public hearing? Mr. Whitethorn, please come to the podium. Introduce yourself, who you represent, and it's a 5-minute limit.
Name is James Whitethorn, and I don't think I'd be in favor of the ordinance, I guess. For one reason is that I think the council should be present. I would agree to do it for planning and zoning, because planning and zoning is an entity that they could probably do it, and it would actually make the city money, because there's a lot of times projects are held up 2 or 3 meetings because not a quorum. So I think it'd be pretty important if you wanted to do it with that, but that's what we were talking about, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And because I've seen projects held up even where they don't even get done in the wintertime because no quorum, and only once a month. So I think that'd be pretty critical. It might help them out, but I think it should be mandatory to be here present for your meetings. Thank you.
Are there any other people? None. The public hearing is now closed. And moves us to bid awards, item 6, 2021 Winter Sand Bid Award. Public Works Director Cotta recommends the Assembly award the winter sand bid to Rock and Road Construction in an amount not to exceed $40,000. I'd entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second. Motion been made by Member Bucci, seconded by Member Kinsinger. Is there any discussion on this?
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, passes unanimously. Next item 7, persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda.
There is not.
One item under the consent agenda, and that's for the Elks Lodge number 1615, liquor license renewal application. The Elks Lodge has applied with the Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office for a liquor license renewal. The assembly may support or protest the application. A protest may not be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. Can you hear me? All right. Okay, so I'd entertain a motion to approve this liquor license renewal application.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 11, report of other officers. Borough federal lobbyist Sebastian O'Kelly with Robertson, Monagle, and Eastow, however you pronounce that one, will provide an update. So Sebastian, nice to see you back in town.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. I'm glad to be back in Petersburg. I last was here, I think, in 2018. So I enjoyed coming back. I'm visiting all of our community clients across the state over the last 2 weeks. And so it's been an interesting trip. There is a lot going on in Washington, D.C. I'll kind of run through some of those initiatives, broader initiatives, as well as things that are specific to the borough's federal agenda, and leave some time for Q&A at the end, if that works for you all. I first wanted to talk a little bit about Coast Guard issues. Some of these things are covered in our last quarterly written report. It's 11 single-space pages. I know it's a lot to read, so I may be repeating myself a little bit, but I'll elaborate as well in a couple areas. First thing on the replacement of the Anacapa, the Coast Guard has officially notified Congress that it will be providing the coastal patrol boat will be transferred from another part of the country coming up to Petersburg in the third quarter of the next fiscal year. So that's going to be summer of 2022. So that, we'll continue to watch to make sure that that goes forward. It's been a long-standing effort now, about 5 years. I think your advocacy, not just the work that we do in DC, but your advocacy as an assembly has made a difference there. So that's been a strong effort. So that's in the works. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the replacement of the Elderberry. Coast Guard over the last decade has been modernizing all of its vessel fleets, from the big national security cutters on down. The buoy tenders is the final class to be modernized. The program is officially called the Waterways Cutters Program. It includes 3 buoy tender classes. There's the river buoys, the inland construction buoys, and the inland buoys. The Elderberry is smaller. The inland buoys are the smaller class vessels. The Elderberry fits in that class. There are currently 4 inland buoy vessels in the country. Petersburg has 1. North Carolina, Oregon, and Michigan have the others. As part of its modernization plan, the Coast Guard is proposing to replace those 4 vessels with 3 new vessels. So you can do the math. That means 1 community is likely going to be out of the vessel. So we will need to, just like we did with the Anacapa, we will need to do a sustained advocacy push on this, both for us back in DC, but I think we will need a DC visit at some point, possibly next year, latter part of next year. Have a little bit of time. The design of the vessel is not complete. The Coast Guard is working with the Army Corps on the design of the vessel. They'll then do an RFP. Sometimes they do an RFP just for the design and then for the construction. Sometimes they blend them. We don't know what they'll do that yet. Then when they make the award, that's kind of when they make the home porting decision. So we got a little bit of time on this, but we're going to need to have a push. Okay. Because obviously we want a new vessel coming to Petersburg. I want to talk a little bit about the appropriations process. This year is the first year return of earmarking, or what's called in the House community projects, called in the Senate congressionally directed spending. There is a new process, new limits, more transparency. So Congress is easing its way back into this process. It's not jumping in, all the way. It's kind of easing its way back into the process. But this is good news. Good news for Alaska. Good news for other rural states that don't always fare well under formula programs or under agency decisions. We submitted on behalf of Petersburg kind of two requests. One was for funding for engineering and design for a new medical center. We submitted a request of something with 16.2 million. And we also submitted kind of a catch-all request for a number of kind of marine infrastructure projects that you have, a number of sort of smaller projects. We kind of bundled them all together in one. Senator Murkowski has requested from the Appropriations Committee 8 million for the hospital. That's before the Labor HHS Subcommittee, which has not yet marked up its bill, probably mark it up end of September, early October. So we will know then more if the full request is in the bill, partial in the half of it in the bill, or maybe the committee rejects it entirely. But so we'll know then there. Both in terms of project requests, both Senator Murkowski and Congressman Young made project requests this year. In the House, that members were limited to 10 project requests for their entire district, or in Mr. Young's case, the entire district is the entire state. So making that cutoff was pretty tough in the House. Senator Sullivan did not submit requests this year. So that's pending. So we'll know more in 3 to 4 weeks, I would say, on what's happened there. We do face kind of a delay in enactment of the appropriations bills this year. That's nothing new. It's kind of the standard process. What complicates it a little bit is the government debt limit. The statutory debt limit is going to expire, and that needs to be extended legislatively, and that's always a tricky issue for Congress to handle. So we don't know how that dynamic will play out. I'm hoping we're not going to have issues dealing with government shutdowns and all those sorts of things. Inclined to think not, but predicting that for sure is not a sure thing. I did want to talk a little bit about the Landless Villages legislation. I know that has been on your radar screen for the last year or so. The House, Congressman Young has introduced the House bill, basically the same bill as last year. Senator Murkowski has not yet introduced the Senate version. Her staff, as you know, came through Southeast back in end of June and early July. I believe stopped in Petersburg to take some comments and hear your thoughts on the bill. Senator Murkowski's staff has asked our communities to submit comments for consideration. From what I know, Ketchikan has not submitted any comments. Now, the proposed withdrawal areas for Ketchikan, for the urban corporation Ketchikan, none of them are within Ketchikan. Maybe that has an impact on their thinking. City of Craig has submitted comments in opposition to the legislation. I don't know what Haynes or Teneke have done. Wrangell has submitted comments, generally supportive of the legislation, but has asked for some modifications to allow for public easements and public access in 4 of the 5 proposed withdrawal areas. So those comments are public. I did pass them on to Stephen for so that you're aware of what some of the other communities are up to. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that has passed the Senate, which you've probably heard quite a bit about. It is a big deal. It's about $550 billion in new federal spending, mostly in traditional transportation areas, but some in some new areas like broadband, which 10 years ago would never even have been considered. To give that some perspective, if you look at the base funding for those programs, it's about $700 billion. So this is $550 billion on top of that. So it's a big increase, and you won't see the impact necessarily right away. So it takes time for these dollars to go out the door, and in many cases, the funding is spread over 5 years. So you will see the impact over, I would say, the next 1 to 5 years. Now you'll see that impact in some of the traditional transportation programs that follow federal state formulas. So the money will come through the state. So there'll be more state transportation projects, but just be mindful that the original source of the money is from the federal government. So, but it will flow through the state, and the states their decision making is preserved in terms of being able to use their discretion on how to spend that money and what projects to approve and move forward with. But there are some things that are more connected directly local to federal, some program areas. One such area is the Port of Infrastructure Development Grant Program and the RAISE Act programs. So the RAISE used to be called BUILD, used to be called Tiger. That's the program that you guys have applied for funding for the Scout Bay project. So that program is going to see funding going to jump from about $1 billion a year to $2.5 billion a year. And then the Port Infrastructure Development Grant Program, that funding is going to jump from 225 to about 700 million a year. So big increases in those programs. So if you have that Scout Bay project, you should probably put that forward again. I know that haven't been successful yet, but we are going to see a bigger pool of money than we have seen in the past. One of the other new initiatives in that bill is there's a lot of money for the ferry system, both for terminal construction and vessel construction. And then there's a new operating subsidy program, $200 million a year over the next 5 years. Brand new. We've not seen this before. The goal here is to support ferry service. AMHS will receive a portion of that funding. We don't know yet. They have to develop the criteria and the formula for how that funding will be spent. There are other ferry systems across the country that will be competing for it, but AMHS will be in line for that. One thing to keep an eye on is making sure that that the goal of the program is not to supplant state funding. The goal of the program is to supplement state funding. So that's something to keep an eye on at the state level, all right? Because the idea is Congress wants to support improved and expanded and enhanced ferry service, not just maintain the status quo. It'll take a little bit of time for that money to go out. Probably won't see it until maybe about a year from now, 9 months from now. So they have to develop the formulas, and that will be done by the agencies. That Congress didn't specify the formula in the legislation. So I think that's good news. I know ferry service has been a big issue all over the state and the coastal communities, but I know it's been a big issue here as well. We do have more money for the Army Corps of Engineers, including for the Section 107 program, which is the program that you guys have used to access for your harbor projects. That funding is available right away. Doesn't mean it'll be spent right away, but it's available right away. It's about $11.6 billion. includes flood control projects, harbor projects, ecosystem restoration projects. The Corps has 60 days from enactment to develop a work plan for how it intends to spend the money. So I would get in line with whatever, where I'm not sure where you guys are in the status of your dredging effort, South Harbor, but if more resources are needed there, this 60 days, actually right when this bill is enacted is when you should be approaching the Alaska Corps District, the regional district, led by Bruce Hexauer, and pushing for that money for any of your harbor projects. Some other good news, even though it really doesn't fit per se under infrastructure, the tucked away in that 2,700-page infrastructure bill is a 3-year extension of the Secure Rural Schools program. That program had officially expired. This most recent payment was your last payment. So the bill has payments for the next 3 years. The baseline for estimating the payment is based on the FY 2017 payment, which was actually the payment that you received. You would have received it in calendar year 2018. So, so I think that's actually, I don't know, I don't have the numbers in front of me. That's a little bit better payment, I think, than what you've received recently. So that's good news. That means we don't have to worry about SRS for a couple more years. So. I also want to talk a little bit about sewer and water. That's another area where we're going to see expanded federal spending, more than double what the federal government has provided to the states for drinking water projects and sewer and water projects. Now, these are revolving funds that are administered by the state, but the money comes from the federal government, or the lion's share of the money comes from the federal government. So that money is going to go way up if you've got sewer and water projects in the hopper. When this bill is enacted, it'll be a good time to start talking to your state DEC. The matches, the match requirements, all those sorts of things, they don't change in this case. So most of the bill preserves matching requirements through a few programs where they waive them. So Congress expects it's going to lay out a lot more federal dollars than state and local governments have to do their share on whatever the cost share is to do the same. That's kind of been the philosophy. I did want to talk a little bit about Economic Development Administration. EDA is not included in the bill, but earlier under the last COVID relief legislation, the American Rescue Plan Act received an amount of funding, I'd say about 8 times its annual appropriations. So it's a one-time slug of money, 8 times its annual appropriations, in addition to what it receives annually. So that's a lot of money for EDA. I would, if you haven't already, I would line up a meeting with Shirley Kelly, Alaska's EDA point contact, and start talking to her about some ideas for some of the projects that you have that could qualify for EDA funding. This might be a good area to pursue some of those smaller maritime or marine infrastructure projects that you've got. I've mentioned to EDA also likes to do kind of what I call regional approaches or regional economic development. It might be a good time to talk to Southeast Conference about a regional docks initiative or regional marine infrastructure initiative, because many communities in Southeast have similar type projects that you guys have. These are the smaller type dock and landing projects. So maybe Southeast Conference can end up being the front for applying for the money and then work through its process to provide grants to the different communities. You can actually bypass a bit of the EDA bureaucracy by going through that if the conference is game to do it. So it's one of the issues that we face is once a project clears Alaska EDA, it's got a long way to go before it gets approved. And it tends to be quite a bit of quite a lot of paperwork and analysis and follow-up that's required and delay in getting projects approved. So maybe working through the regional entities, allow them to go through that. And then you can perhaps streamline the final award process at that point. There's some other things. I think I've spoke probably long enough. There's things going on with the Tongass and a few other areas I certainly could talk about if you have any questions, but maybe I should stop at this point and open the floor to any questions you've got.
So questions on Sebastian's presentation? Manager over there taking notes, so I'm sure he will follow through on your recommendations on people to get a hold of for certain topics. Member Kinsinger.
Yes, we're renovating Crystal Lake Hatchery. I guess we're planning on bonding for that. We're actually voting on that coming election. Is there any possibility of any of the infrastructure money that we could possibly try and get for that project?
If I may jump in, it's not the hatchery, it's the.
Oh, sorry. Yes, hydro. Yes, thank you.
Oh, so yeah,
sorry.
So there is and I've talked a little bit with Carl about this. There's a provision in the energy section of the bill that creates this I would call it investment type credits or investment reimbursement for up to 30% of the project cost. That project has to demonstrate improved efficiency. So this is to be a program directly administered by the Department of Energy. So I think you can offset maybe up to 30% of the cost, but you have to demonstrate that there's improved energy efficiency that will result of the investment. It's not really meant to be kind of a capacity increasing program. It's more like being more efficient. So that once that gets enacted, I will keep. I've told Steve and Carl I will keep them involved in what the program details will be and the application criteria. So you can offset. You might be able to offset at least maybe a third of the project costs. So that doesn't eliminate all your bonding needs, perhaps, but it might eliminate some of it.
Any other questions? Member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No comment, just a thank you to Seb for your continued efforts working on behalf of Petersburg. And since Steve was taking notes, I look forward to following up with him on the wealth of those issues. So just thank you again, Seb.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for coming. You mentioned about the appropriations for design work at the hospital, like 18 or 16.2 million, and there's already some money, like 8 million set aside for site preparation and design work. So is that 16 million on top of that 8, or is that 16?
So yeah, maybe I'll explain the process. So every year now that we're going back to congressionally designated spending, and they've been doing this anyway, every year the delegation asks for requests from everybody within the state for funding to be submitted to the Appropriations Committee. So we go and we contact Steve. What are your priorities? They've been approved by you guys. Some of them are extensions of existing projects. So we submitted a request to Congressman Young and Senator Murkowski for 16.2 million for the design and engineering work. And Congress didn't make the cut for Congressman Young's 10 projects for the entire state. Senator Murkowski has submitted a request for 8 million in fiscal 22 to the Subcommittee on Labor HHS Appropriations. So that request is pending. The subcommittee will act end of this month, early October. That's not official. That's kind of my guesstimate. We will know at that time if the request is funded. 3 things can happen. The subcommittee funds it at 8 million. The subcommittee doesn't fund it at all, or the subcommittee funds somewhere between 0 and 8. Then that's just in the Senate. So the Senate and House will have to reconcile later in the year to fund the federal government for FY22. So right now we don't have anything in the House. So what we have heard is at least informally that the House will respect the Senate's projects and the Senate will respect the House's projects. So that tends to be good news. Means if you're in kind of one bill on one side, then your chances are you're going to make it all the way through, even if you're not in the bill on the other side. So I hope that lay it out pretty clearly.
Any other questions? Yeah, once again, thanks for coming and hopefully you enjoyed your time in Petersburg.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Be in contact.
You guys got a great little community. I enjoy coming and seeing some changes and then seeing some things the same too. So it's good.
Thanks for coming, Sebastian.
All right, thank you.
Oh, that brings us to the next report, and it's going to be from the Petersburg Medical Center CEO, Phil Hofter. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates. So the build off of some of the, sort of the good news there. The Petersburg Medical Center has created a community engagement committee. And the purpose of that is to look at the dialogue for the future of PMC's future healthcare needs. And that committee has met a couple of times and they're going to report at the next board meeting in September on those recommendations. Part of those will be creation of dialogue within the community and stakeholders within the community and building off discussion about healthcare services. So this is great and great timing as well. We're also going to discuss, the ability to report out on our community needs assessment, which was completed at the end of July. And we're compiling that currently and providing a professional presentation. So be discussed as well. Secondary to that is just letting the assembly knows this, but also to the community that our PMC board meetings are public. I encourage the community, if they're interested in healthcare, new facility, healthcare services, issues related to COVID, to join in that meeting that is noticed, is provided out to the community. It's also on our website. Our website is pmcak.org. Has all of our information on there. It has presentations. It has work sessions. It has community cafes. It has master planning that was comprehensively done through the funding of the Denali Commission. All those aspects of that are on our website. So I encourage the community to access that. The second thing is, or the third thing is COVID. Some of the situational update. Our PMC response, we're ramping up with the expectation that the Delta variant is in mind. As you know, with the statewide, what is being experienced at the statewide with our hospitalizations, we just want to make sure that we're prepared. And I want to thank Sandy and Steve for putting that meeting together about a week and a half ago, where we met locally to kind of look at our response and making sure that we can scale if the need arose. And so fortunately right now we're pretty low risk in the community, but that certainly can change overnight, seeing how we're seeing the state. And there's a lot of hospitals on a day-to-day basis on divert status. Even if you come in for a regular, or not regular, but if an emergency and you need to be medevac, that really impacts where you go. Some of our tertiary care facilities in the state are really even closing ERs. So it's on a day-to-day basis. That's pretty noticeable, and we certainly want to keep an eye on that situation. A couple of updates, just routine operations. We have two large-scale projects going on at the hospital. The first one is a electronic health records implementation. This is really to meet the needs and sort of the increased technology and regulation that we're seeing in our industry, and that's a Cerner electronic health record. It's really a tough project. Our staff are really engaged in that, and it's about a 9-month implementation. We're about halfway in. And the second thing is our financial and rev cycle billing consultant group. We switched that over earlier in February, and that is going well. But it's also a pretty significant project. I continue to have conversations with search related to collaborative opportunities within the community. As those come up, I'll provide some updates as we go forward with that, with any opportunities. A couple of things that are really worth acknowledging is that I want to thank the Petersburg Medical Center Wellness Department. It's sort of a branch or an arm of the Joy Jansen Clinic. It's a newer department, and they've worked really hard at putting the health fair, the safe, COVID-safe health fair together for back to school, and working with public health nursing and providing immunizations and health screenings, and also working with the school. So that was a great opportunity for elementary school and middle school. They also helped facilitate a Super Kids camp through Kinderskog, the nature program, and they worked with PIA and providing a traditional foods day, and also working with Jamie Cabral. Thank you to Jamie for providing a Native Youth Olympics session there for the day. This weekend, they helped with the Rainforest Run. There was a good showing yesterday. You hadn't had a chance to go. And then we're also working with Bartlett Diabetes Prevention Program, and we're trying to scale up our needs with behavioral health, since there's sort of a gap in the community on that. So, and lastly, go vote. Make sure you get out and vote. So I think it's October 5th, correct?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Thank you, Phil. Are there any questions of Mr. Hofstadter, member Mute?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report, Phil. I appreciate it. Who are the members of the Community Engagement Committee?
3 members of our board.
Okay,
You want me-
your board members. Okay,
Yes,
great.
correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Hofstadter? Thank you, Phil, for your presentation today, your report. That brings us to the mayor's report, fairly short. Congratulations to Joe Bertinoli on his retirement as the borough's building official and code enforcement officer. Thank you, Joe B., for 30 years of service. Enjoy your retirement. October elections. Borough elections will be held on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021 in the community gym from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Absentee voting will be held in the police training room on the municipal building from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, beginning Wednesday, September 15th, coming right up, and ending at 12 p.m. on Monday, October 4th, 2021. For more information, please contact Clerk Thompson at dthompson@petersburgak.gov or 772-5405. And I'd just like to put a little thanks to PIA and everybody, Rainforest Concrete, I believe is the name, and Reed Brothers for doing the sidewalk. I think they were all involved in it. PIA, I think, came up with the funding, and it's a big improvement up by Hammer Lecon. That's all I have, so we'll turn it over to Steve for his manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Alaska ARPA Business Relief Program. The Alaska State Legislature has appropriated $90 million from the state's American Rescue Plan, which was COVID money. State and local fiscal recovery funds, and basically it's toward a tourism and business relief grant program to be administered by the Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development. The application period will open in the fall of 2021. Specific dates have not yet been determined, but more information and links on the economic development page of the Borough website will follow. Lots of conversation about the post office. I can tell you what I've done. I can tell you probably doesn't mean much, unfortunately. So we've reached out to Sherry Klein, who is Senator Murkowski's person here in Southeast. She tried to reach out to the post office and told me to expect phone calls last week. I got none. Sherry's traveling, and I'll catch up with her when she's in a place where she can communicate. I've tried myself trying to find who to talk to at the post office beyond local. Have not got anywhere. Just it seems to be difficult to get a hold of folks that are in a senior management position. So don't have any good information to give other than we're trying and we'll keep at it. Seems to be working through Sherry Klein will probably be the best solution once she's off for a trip, and there's a chance to kind of follow up and find out why these folks aren't calling us back. I wish I had better news than that. Also, Phil mentioned the meeting that we had. We had a couple of takeaways from that, which was to talk about what is our process going to be in the harbor? I think we've got that kind of nailed down. Dr. Tasillo is, working with the harbor master on any questions that come up. And we feel we have the authority to tell a cruise ship to not unload if somebody on board has COVID. And that was really our biggest issue, is we didn't want a repeat of what happened, so that if somebody was COVID positive on board, that no one got off that boat. So we'll have more official, stuff in writing about that later. But for the moment, we are administering it that way and have not had any pushback to my knowledge. The other part of that was reviewing the borough medical officer ordinance. And lots of folks taking a look at that. The group, various members of the group took, kind of thing. Our attorney's taken a look at it. It's gone back to Sandy and Chief Kerr, both from an enforcement perspective and from Sandy's background and everything that she does in emergency management. So once that we're all on the same page with the attorney and our staff, will bring that to the assembly for your gut folks to take a look at. We're not going to bring it to you till we can actually all agree on it first. And let's see. Sandy is working with the fire chief Stolpe in reviewing various department policies in the fire department and EMS. Their fire department is also working on specifications for the new fire engine. That's, again, as we've said several times, that's going to take a while before that's actually done and then vetted, and before we can actually order the equipment. They're working on the Learn Not to Burn program, which is fire prevention in the schools, and a possible fire recruit class in early 2022. We are short of volunteers in the fire department in pretty much every area. Thanks to Search and Rescue for organizing the annual volunteer fire department picnic. The weather was a little sketchy, so they canceled the Sandy Beach and did it at the fire station, which worked out really well for everyone. At Parks and Rec, we are going to be doing some additional work down at Sandy Beach, just for everyone's information. We're going to add some additional parking, not a whole lot, but we're going to, kind of four spaces, and then see how that goes before we make decisions. They'll be added near the Shelter 1, which is seeing a lot of use with the people wanting to go up and see the new Raven's Roost cabin, and we expect that to continue. So we need to take that into account. We're also seeing a lot of use at the new playground, and so parking is a little harder to come by at times, so we'll fix some of that. We've got a road culvert on the access to Shelter 1 that's collapsing that we'll fix. And the thing that always gets people interested is we'll probably take down about 3 or 4 trees that look like they're dead near that Shelter 1. Lots of bird holes in them and no branches living. So they're clearly dead. We don't want to leave them to fall without us watching it and hurt either people or the shelter. And this work is scheduled to be done sometime in late September. Youth basketball registration is open. Online registration is available, or visit Parks and Rec to get signed up. New aquatic and facility fall schedule is out. It's viewable on the Parks and Rec website, Facebook, and at the facility. We did some work with the school as well as our electrical and contractor on the aquatic center. They were here last week. We thought we had a schedule put together where they were going to do it next week. And then some of the things we were expecting to get did not show up, including light switches of all things. The lighting panel came, light switches did not, and the lighting panel is new. Our switches in the building are old and they don't work together. So we're pushing it back. They're working again with the school, trying to pick a time frame that'll work. At this point, it may very well be after January before we can get all the equipment here. Their contractors having availability and then actually schedule it with the school. So we're working on it. I think everybody's doing a good job keeping in touch so that we don't do it right when there's a swim meet or something. And hopefully we can get parts that we need. Visitation continues at the assisted living. You may call them with any questions. We're requesting that visitors to the facility wear masks and don't visit at all if any symptoms of being ill, or if you've traveled, consider a COVID test prior to visiting. We continue to have resident assistance program positions open at assisted living. it's becoming a little critical, more so than we like. We've got 2 40-hour positions and a 30-hour applications can be found on the Borough website. Thanks to the PMC doctors who continue to see residents for routine appointments at assisted living. A big thank you to Dr. Heyer. Mindy and Sheila continue monthly meetings with Dr. Heyer as a physician liaison, and we are grateful for her willingness to do this. It continues to go very well. The deck project there is getting closer to be finished. They're now able to sit on the deck in the sun or under cover in the rain. The next part of that project is electricity, benches, planters, and deck furniture. We don't have the money for that quite yet. So they're back on the fundraising kick. If you'd like to donate, please contact Sally Dwyer at dwyersa@gci.net. And donations can be sent to Petersburg Borough at P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, decking out the deck in the memo. Huge thank you to Sally and all those who have donated. The new Borough website is up and running. Apart from a few initial issues, it seems to be working well and is getting lots of traffic. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please let us know and we'll take a look at it. The library will be opening 11 to 8 on Mondays again, starting September 13th. And we unfortunately will not be offering passport services from the 21st of September through October 15th. People needing a new passport are encouraged to contact the library prior to September 20th to schedule an appointment. Library was co-hosting the Rainforest Festival September 9th through the 12th. And in the harbor, we're working on, in South Harbor, we've got to split one of our fire lines. They're working with Tamco to get that repaired. And we're kind of winding down on the tour ship stops. Mid-September, we should be done. And gives us a chance to catch up there. Streets crew has been catching up on brushing and ditching with grading as the weather permits. And we operated a little bit shorthanded, but we had 2 members in Anchorage for asbestos abatement training through the end of that week. We're catching up on this type of training for our crew due to many classes being canceled or unavailable over the last 18 months due to COVID. FEMA representatives performed a site visit on August 31st to tour the washout area at Public Works, document their observations, and help prepare paperwork for the ongoing grant process related to future repairs. Again, this is a big underground culvert that runs right through our yard that is washing away, and some of the hillside washed and put stuff down into the slough. So we really want to get that fixed. Our consultant is Horion Associates, and they're making pretty good progress on the design of what we need to do to put the new replacement culvert in place. Work is progressing on the motor pool shop with the interior framing, I think almost done or in process. The project schedule has slipped a little and substantial completion will likely not occur by September 30th. However, the project is expected to be finished prior to the final completion date of November 30th, stipulated by the contract. We do expect to have the motor pool operations move back into the renovated space before the onset of winter. That'll be really nice for them. It was kind of cold where they were last year or so. There have been several reports of bears roaming or getting into garbage. Public Works through Chris's office has started a public education effort to raise awareness of the garbage bear issue. Sanitation is, should have said sanitation, not Public Works, but a public service announcement has been made via radio and website, and we have an ad going in the pilot as well. Chris working on a rewrite of the sanitation ordinance in addition to rate changes, which have been recommended by our rate study consultant. There'll be stronger language incorporated requiring that garbage be kept secured from bears and other animals, dogs, ravens, etc. For portions of the ordinance related to bears, we are coordinating our effort with other agencies, including the Petersburg Police Department and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and the state troopers. And last is we've got Sam leading an effort up at the Baylor to upgrade our waste oil filtration system. This is the last phase of a significant project to improve the waste oil processing at the Baylor. It should result in a more efficient process and less equipment downtime. And that's it. Unless there's questions.
Any questions of the manager, for the manager on his report? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report, Steve. On the resident assistance position up at Mountain View Manor, are we advertising outside of Petersburg for those positions?
In Southeast, yes, but not beyond there. They're the Alaska Jobs, which goes statewide.
Yeah, another question, Mr. Mayor. We might be talking about it when we're talking about the bear or the emergency ordinance, but is there a time frame for when the sanitation or the upgraded garbage ordinance will be before us?
Chris, you'll need to weigh in on that one.
I'm going to try and have it ready by the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Steve. Then before we go any farther, Member Norheim, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I've been listening for, I don't know. I got in right when I think it was the Coast Guard guy was talking.
Well, that was actually our lobbyist from Washington DC, but, okay, so
Oh, okay,
you're listening and you're fairly faint on this end, but I just wanted to recognize that you're here, and if you want to chime in, just get my attention. That brings
will
us to
do.
item 14, unfinished business, ordinance 2021-13, an ordinance amending section 3.08.080 of the municipal code entitled quorum and voting requirements to allow the assembly member participation by teleconference to be counted for purposes of determining a quorum. This is the second reading. If adopted, this ordinance will allow assembly members' participation to be counted for purposes of determining a quorum. And this is the second reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So
Second.
Motion been made by member Kinsinger, seconded by member Mutri and Stanton Greger. Any discussion? Member Stanton Greger.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to briefly repeat some of the comments I made at the last meeting. We've had times before when we've not been able to have 4 as a quorum, looking back to several meetings back, and it pushes borough business back. It creates inefficiencies where we end up stacking meetings week to week. As evidenced by last meeting, Member Norham was calling in from his boat. I was calling in from a mountain in Montana, and I felt like our dialogue was still spirited. The debate was still able to occur without interruption. I think we owe it to the public to be reasonably efficient as an assembly, getting business done. And this ordinance, I think, helps with that. So I will be voting yes.
Any other comments? Member Kinsinger.
yes, I would like to say that I think everybody agrees that we need to try and be here present for all meetings as much as possible, but a lot of things intervene in everybody's lives, and that's why I think this ordinance is important. I also like to point out, and my particular concern is with planning and zoning, having been on that board for 5 years and had innumerable meetings delayed because of lack of quorum. So this ordinance not only affects our body, but also planning and zoning. So that's why I think it needs to be adopted.
Any other input from assembly members? Member Norheim?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, if you could talk a little louder. You're kind of faint unless the clerk can turn up the volume.
Okay, I will talk louder.
You're coming in clear.
Okay, obviously calling in right now. I'm in Scow Bay. I think the ordinance is good. Like was just pointed out, I don't think anybody is actively trying to avoid being in that room. I would prefer to be there. Obviously, I can't be. And I feel like if we put this through, there would be less arguments for why, a fisherman probably shouldn't be on the assembly because we can't always be there. If we put this through, that whole harbor would feel like they can actually participate because we can find spots of cell service here and there. It's not everywhere, but I've been able to find it in spots, just all over on the water. And I feel like it would open it up to, half the economy in this town and the people in the harbors. And I would think it would remove the excuse of I can't run for the assembly because I'm not there. And it would also remove the argument of they shouldn't be on the assembly because they can't be here. So I'll be voting for this.
Okay, thank you. Member Mutri?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I agree with Taylor or Member Norheim. We spent a lot of money in this room getting it ready for Zoom and the audio visual thing. It's just a good idea to have a program that everybody can participate in. And like Member Norheim said, you don't want to exclude people from participating, and things come up that you can't be at a meeting, and if there's big, heavy decisions that we have to deal with, we could certainly postpone those until the full assembly's in the room here. But I think it's a good idea, and it's time to do this here, so I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have input? Like at the first reading, I'm opposed to this. I think over the last 10 years, I can't think of a handful of meetings that have been canceled due to a lack of a quorum. And now that we're not through the pandemic, I guess, but we're having people back in the room. I think if someone has a concern or if we're discussing an issue that affects them, they have the right to come and look you face to face when you're giving your presentation, and when they're asking questions or, so I can't support this because of those reasons. So if there's no other input, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
David,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2021-13 passes with a 6-1 vote with the mayor voting no. So we'll see it at the next meeting on the third reading. Brings us to item 15. Ordinance 2021-14. This is an emergency ordinance temporarily suspending baler for household baler waste delivered to the baler facility. This is the first and only reading. If adopted, ordinance 2021-14 will temporarily suspend fees for a 60-day period from the date of adoption for household baler waste delivered to the baler facility during normal business hours by residents. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Stanton Gregor. And I would like the clerk to read some input from member Lynn. If you would, please.
Yes. Member Lynn emailed and asked if this could be read under this agenda item. I should be the very first person to want action regarding the docks.
Nope, sorry, I got the wrong
That's okay. I almost did it too. We'll wait.
15D. I thought it was an A. I can't read. Sorry about that. Okay, so is there any input from the assembly in the chambers or by member Norheim on ordinance 2021-14? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I asked the city clerk to help me or put this together. She did 90% of it with the help of the city attorney. The idea here is we obviously have a problem with people not taking care of their garbage in town. You can drive through town and see where the bears know to go get somewhat of a free meal. And, you know, I've talked to the fishing game biologist as well as Chris Cotta and the police chief. And I am hoping that whether or not we pass this or not, I want this to be a tool for folks who find their garbage is full before the sanitation crew gets there to pick it up. I've heard lots of comments from a few folks about, well, this is just going to be inviting people to take all their junk they've been storing in the garage for years. And that's not the intent here. The intent is to have a place for people to dispose of their garbage before the sanitation truck gets there. It might not be a perfect ordinance, but I think if people are going to be cited for not taking care of their garbage, at least they have an opportunity, whoever's enforcing this, the police or the state troopers, to educate members of the public that there is an option that you can take your stuff up to the garbage and throw it away for the next 2 months. I don't know if this is a perfect solution. We had an email from Director Cotta on Friday who wasn't in support of this, and that's fine. But he also mentioned in his email that he had some suggestions. And I'd like to hear those suggestions, but I just, for the sake of discussion, wanted to get it out there and see where we go. So thank you.
They will ask Mr. Cotta to chime in after the assembly is done. Member Stanton Gregor?
Actually, I was gonna add a two-part question for Member Cotta, if that's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
All right. Chris, thanks for taking the time to write the memo. I, read it and spoke with you briefly this weekend. From my perspective, the financial end of it isn't something that, just me personally, I'm concerned about. No disrespect to your facility and the finances of it, but if our goal is to reduce garbage strewn on the street and people securing their garbage, that's more of, my concern. So this ordinance would accomplish that. I'm all on board because we've all seen this the last several years. So my first question for you is, do you think this ordinance accomplishes that? Do you think giving people an opportunity to drop their garbage off between, correct me if I'm wrong, noon to 3, Monday through Friday, and or those days, if this will accomplish that goal, part one, if you would, Mr. Cotta?
Well, I don't really think it will accomplish that goal. Just given the fact that it's easier for the customer to do other things than to take time out of the middle of their day to come up to the baler and dump garbage. A simple measure like putting a tie down strap on your can until the morning of pickup. Or, some folks have the option to keep their garbage inside. Those things are a lot easier to do than making a special trip up the baler to dump your garbage. So I guess I don't see where this would really help, and the way the ordinance is written, it is going to end up costing the department money. So we're not really seeing it as a positive thing.
Fair enough.
You have another question?
Yeah, just my follow-up to it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with you on that. In our neighborhood, we've lots of green space. We've had bears there through the years, and luckily our neighborhood has banded together and, bought each other tie downs, ropes, et cetera, and been effective, even for those without garages. Secondly, and I'll be brief because it doesn't directly relate to this, is, I've been on the assembly a couple of years now, and it seems like most fall or times around this time of year, we're talking about education, about, bear behavior and what we can do to increase, people securing their garbage, and it just doesn't work. There's another way to phrase it. This has been a recurring narrative talking about, well, if we do this differently, people might do this. Like, as you craft this ordinance, I think there needs to be some sort of fine schedule very similar to Juneau and Sitka. I know that might not be popular in some quarters. I don't want it to be anything militant. I think a warning is very appropriate because everybody makes mistakes sometimes. But I think we need to have some teeth in this where people's behavior won't change, or we'll be sitting here a year from now talking about bear education. And it's a frustrating recurring narrative, and it's not great for our community or, and having bears desensitized to humans. I think taking appropriate steps can be necessary. So I look forward to seeing the ordinance as it comes before us, Mr. Cotta.
Any other input from assembly members? Member Mutri?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to follow up on why this emergency ordinance won't work. Now, I haven't really heard anything that helps me understand that at this point. I've heard that there's easier things to do between 12 and 3 and keep your garbage, indoors. And I understand that. But I'm also trying to understand, do we know how much money this emergency ordinance is going to cost us? And why would it cost us money if we have somebody working up at the baler anyway, and we're trying to look for a solution to get the garbage off the streets in between? I'm just trying to understand why it's costing us, and is public. Yeah, that's my first question. I'll stop there.
Can you respond to that, Mr. Cotta?
I guess in general terms, so our September and October revenue, generally, it varies from year to year, but the total revenue for that 60-day period is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 on the baler side. That's the stuff coming across the scale. Some of that's going to be commercial. A lot of it is residential. So, you could maybe say half of it's residential. So that, just say $25,000 potentially that we could be losing if we all of a sudden just make residential garbage, no charge thing for 2 months. So that's the possible cost. You know, we're as interested as everyone else in addressing this bear problem. You know, it creates a mess in town. There's bears in town. People don't like that. It's you know, potentially a problem situation. But you know, in my conversations with our customers and my conversations with local law enforcement, no one's brought up this 60-day suspension of bailiff fees, other than you know, having this put forward in the assembly packet. I haven't heard that from anyone else. What I have heard from the folks I've been talking to in our customer base and law enforcement is that we need more teeth in our sanitation ordinance. And so that's what we're working on, to basically put some, you know, stronger measures in place that allow us to issue warnings, potentially fines, you know, for non-compliance. And so that's kind of the direction we're working toward. We're also doing some public education. We're hoping that will get the folks that maybe just forget or, you know, haven't tried hard enough to keep their garbage secured. You know, we've been doing public outreach in, you know, the media. We're also doing some individual outreach. If we know a customer's had repeated problems with their garbage getting pilfered by the bears, we'll talk to that customer individually. So we're trying to do some things that will help reduce the problem without, you know, harming the revenue stream potentially, like we feel like this ordinance would do.
Probably.
Yeah. I'll offer my comments also kind of in response to Assemblymember Mucci's question. And I'll just use my own example of having a bear get into my garbage last fall because I wasn't really thinking. I didn't tie down my can and I only had a bag of garbage. It wasn't that it was an overfull can. All it takes is the one bag. And if I were to say take advantage of this no bailer fee in that situation, it would involve driving a bag up to the bailer at a time, which would not be an efficient use of that staff member's time. But that's what in effect that scenario could have been. Instead, I just keep it all inside until garbage day. Also, I will say my first thought on reading this was, oh, Brian will be home and he'll be so excited to get everything up to the bailer. So that's just my own first impression of what this could mean for other people as they think about it being implemented. And so that's why I'm excited to see what the next meeting, hopefully we can get some. I like the idea of teeth, you know, the irony of using teeth in a bear discussion is worth thinking about because it isn't great that we're inviting bears into residential neighborhoods by not doing very basic precautions. So hopefully by continuing to even talk about it at this level multiple times each season, it's permeating a few more minds. But I don't know if that helps answer some questions, Member Mucci, about where people's brains go with different concepts, but just wanted to offer my 2 cents on that.
Okay, any other assembly members want to speak? Chief Kerr, you had your hand up and then you wanted to comment.
Yes, I actually had the same response as Chelsea did to this ordinance about I can take a bunch of stuff up there and not have to pay for it at the time. But the thing with the trash can is we're not talking about over full trash cans. Exactly what she pointed out. We're talking about a bag too. I mean, they're all closed cans and we've seen that bears are kept out for the most part because they don't want to work that hard. They just want an easy meal. With a ratchet strap or a bungee cord will not work or rope tied to these things. That works. So this emergency ordinance, all that would do is give people an extra reason to go get rid of some of their extra stuff they have laying around, I believe. When the people who will take advantage of this are not our problem people. We're talking about people who are our problem people are the ones that, oh, it won't happen to my trash can this time, or it's been hit a couple times. Those people aren't going to be taking advantage of this. They won't even take the extra step just to put a ratchet strap on their can. So one of the things in this new ordinance that Chris was talking about is like the fireworks ordinance, you have a tiered system. I mean, the state fine is $300. Your first offense, that's too much. So we're talking about doing a tiered fine structure. Every year it resets. This December 31st, we'll just make it something like that so it's easy to track. I mean, we get calls, we educate people. And so that's just the input I had for this.
Okay, thank you. And Member Mucci, you got another comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I just want a couple of things I just needed to be clear on. This emergency ordinance is not, it's suspending. You're not being charged to take household waste to the garbage dump. And I am still being billed for garbage collection at my house, whether or not I've had anything in it or not. So I don't understand that loss of $40,000 to $60,000 over that. And maybe Chris can answer that, or maybe he can't. And I'm also trying to figure out, is there a preferred method of securing a garbage can so that the public works sanitation guys can empty the cans, or is there any kind of public outreach for the community about what you'd like them to do with their garbage cans in the meantime that it gets picked up? Thank you.
I think Mr. Cotta implied the cost would be $25,000 because of the stuff that goes over the baler, over the scale that doesn't get picked up. So I don't think it has anything to do with the garbage pickup. But as far as my opinion, latching the cans, maybe if we get a new sanitation ordinance and it has some, guidelines in there, and then maybe a fine structure, which I don't know if I'd agree with it, but we could get the repeat offenders to finally try to do something. So anyway.
So just to follow up, so will the new public sanitation ordinance have guidelines in it for securing garbage cans? Thank you.
Is there anything potentially going to be in there like that, Mr. Cotta? I'd let you answer that question. I guess we'll see it when we have it presented in front of us.
At this point, we were going to keep, my plan was to keep the language somewhat vague, and that it would give the customer the opportunity to determine the best way to secure their garbage. For some customers, that's going to be keeping it inside. I'll use myself as an example. I have a shed outside that it's easy to keep the garbage in there. I take it out of the shed, put it in the can on the morning of collection day, and then I don't have to fasten my lid down for that reason. Some folks don't have that option. There's some folks that don't have any exterior storage or way to keep garbage outside and other than in the can. And so for those folks, a ratchet strap or something like that, rope works fine too if you cinch it down tight. As long as it's removed before the collection truck comes by, then it's no hassle for us. But in our PSAs that we've been putting out have kind of outlined some of those options that folks have for keeping the garbage out of the reach of the bears. So I think in the ordinance itself, we'll probably not list a bunch of specifics, but we will certainly make an effort to educate customers in other ways as to what kinds of things can be done.
Guess in response to that, if the ordinance, when it gets presented in front of us, doesn't have the language, any assembly member can make an amendment to add whatever language they want. If it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So if there's no other discussion on this other than Member Norheim has his hand raised.
Yes.
Taylor, you have input?
It was basically what's already been covered. Noon to 3 is not an optimum time for people who are working. I kind of understanding where Member Mucci's coming from is that you're still getting the fees for your household garbage, but it's free to bring your bag of garbage to the garbage dump, thus negating the issue. I understand that, but it's the time the dump is open is not optimum for a lot of people. And I'm not sold on that it would actually be effective in getting that job done. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Member Norheim. So with all the input we've had, if some of the members that haven't spoke to this yet have any comment, I don't see any. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
David,
No.
Jay,
No.
Taylor,
Sorry, no.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Chelsea.
No.
Okay, the emergency ordinance, 2021-14 fails with a 5-1 vote or, with Member Mucci voting yes. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda. Item B, ordinance 2021-16, an ordinance amending chapters 9.16, 14.04, 14.08, 14.12, and 14.16 of the municipal code to authorize creation and recording of a lien in favor of the borough in order to secure payment of delinquent fees, costs, and expenses. This is the first reading. If adopted, this ordinance will authorize the borough to place liens on real property to secure past due utility fees, costs incurred by the municipality in the abatement of an unsafe or dangerous building, and other fees and charges provided for by this ordinance. I would entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading. Is there a second? Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Any discussion? Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you. It's actually a question for the borough manager, if that's all right, Mr. Manager. Just for those listening at home, could you give some context for why this ordinance is before us today?
Occasionally, people owe the borough money in various capacities and don't choose to pay it for some reason. And in some cases, utilities, it's a little easier to handle, but things like sales tax and such can be a little harder for the borough to collect. So this allows us to put liens on property so that the borough taxpayers are not left holding the bag if someone decides not to pay. Jody, did I hit it or close enough to it?
Yeah, we actually already do liens for sales tax and property tax. Utility billing, it's not a large deal. That actually stemmed from community development, this ordinance. And also, I believe in around 2017, the legislature, Alaska legislature, changed the rules so we could put liens on utilities and other items, which wasn't the case before. And we just had never updated our language. So we're doing so now. I don't know if you have anything you want to chime in.
Liz, do you have any?
That's okay.
No,
That's fine. It's what Jody said, we've never had the ability to do that as a municipality, except for property and sales tax. So if someone has an outstanding balance because we do some sort of nuisance abatement, 2017, the legislature changed the state statute. We're just implementing that new. And also just for clarification, at this point, this won't apply. We have two different ordinances. One is dangerous building and one is nuisance. This only will apply to the nuisance portion of it. The dangerous building still hasn't been moved over to the borough code, and we'll do that.
Thank you for clarifying that for those listening at home who don't pay attention to these things as closely as us. So much appreciated.
Any other input? So putting a lien, so that means that if they don't pay a utility bill, or for instance, or if they don't, wouldn't you just go shut off their utilities in that case? Or couldn't you not, I mean, I don't know what the other avenues are, but if someone doesn't pay their property tax, would you be able to put a lien on their house? Would that be possible in this?
And as Jody and Liz said, that already exists. I was being very general, but using Liz's example is a good one. So we have a nuisance issue where someone is not doing what they're supposed to do. We've gone through the process of warning them. They've been fined for not cleaning something up or doing something, and they just refuse to do so. It's difficult to collect that money. Being able to put a lien on their property means we still may not get it quickly, but if they go to ever sell that property, the borough is a lien holder. And it's a useful tool. People don't, really want that to happen. So sometimes it can get folks to realize that we're serious and pay the fine or the cleanup fee that they has been asked to do.
Well, hopefully we won't have to use it. Any other input? The clerk call the roll on ordinance 2021-16.
Chelsea?
Taylor, did you chime in there?
I'm trying to use the hand raise thing instead of interrupting. I was wondering, and this is just a out there kind of thing, if somebody was choosing to not pay their property tax as a form of protest over something, whatever, around town, would this allow for the borough to just put a lien on their house or property or whatever because they don't feel like they want to pay for something that they just don't agree with?
Well, someone could probably answer it better than me, but I would envision if it's a property tax issue and you get your assessment, then you go through the appeals process. And if you go through that, you get a reduction fine. If you don't, then you're supposed to pay what the amount designated is.
Just to clarify, that exists apart from this ordinance. That already exists. This ordinance doesn't change that.
Again, that was my fault when I'm speaking to your question. I was being very broad and threw that in there.
Okay, does that clarify for you, Member Norheim?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other input, will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 2021-16?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2021-16 passes unanimously in its first reading. That brings us to item C under new business, purchase of replacement police patrol vehicle. Public Works Director Cotter recommends the assembly approve the purchase of a police patrol unit in the amount of $57,274. I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Any discussion? I know these vehicles probably get more miles on them than any vehicle in our fleet, so, in probably time. So if there's no questions for the chief or Chris Cotta, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
David?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, that purchase request passes unanimously. That brings us to item D, Entrance Island Dock, Kupernoff Dock, and Papke's Dock. Assembly Member Mucci wishes to direct Manager Giesbrick to begin discussions with the state DOT about resolving the ownership or transfer of ownership of the Entrance Island Dock, the Kupernoff Dock, and the Papke's Landing Dock. I'd entertain a motion to give that direction to the manager.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Okay, now, Clerk Thompson, will you please read Bob's email?
Try number 2, Member Lynn's comments. I should be the very first person to want action regarding the docks outside Service Area 1, but I am not. Let's review recent actions the Assembly has taken. Assembly voted to contract for plans to fix Banana Point breakwater. Assembly voted to challenge state's decision to retain ownership of 2 parcels that are key potential boat launching facilities for our residents. Assembly voted to contract for alternative draft designs for Papke's that are to be available for public comment. Design is to consider potential acquisition or trade of land. Assembly asked manager to contact Kupernoff regarding their interest and intent on the dock. This he has done. With all these actions in motion, it is very premature to have the manager explore options with the state. I believe we would be in a much stronger negotiating position if we wait to have answers to the action items we put in motion and have, as an assembly, agreed on a course of action. I believe the manager has already been contacted by the state on these items. No action is needed for the manager to keep up to date on all possible grants, proposals, trades, acquisitions, etc. In summary, I believe this action item puts the borough in a much weaker position to negotiate and reduces effectiveness of potential public comment on plans, at least for Papke's. Member Bob Lynn.
Okay, thank you for reading that, Clerk Thompson. Is there any other input on this request?
Yes, please.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and any of you assembly members, the manager cut me off if I'm missing on this one, but several years ago, we were exploring some of this very topic with all the various parties, and if I recall correctly, the deal for all three of these facilities was something that we had no interest in as an assembly. Am I on good footing so far, Mr. Manager? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so with that premise, I agree with Member Lynn's statements. Reopening like a formal negotiation doesn't seem prudent with those other irons in the fire, so to speak. Thanks.
Any other input? Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this, I have this on there because I didn't expect this to, this negotiations to be done in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. I think there is some question about the status of the entrance island dock. I think the state would like to have nothing to do with it, and whether or not the borough wants anything to do with it. I think some of us have been out there a couple of times, and it's about sinking. I had a chance to talk to the Kupernoff Assembly or Council over the weekend, and they're in favor of us at least starting the conversation with the state so that we can come up with some kind of plan to turn either the Kupernoff dock over to the Borough of Petersburg that the city of Kupernoff wants, and then take care of the Papke's dock. We heard Sebastian speak earlier about infrastructure stuff, and there could be funds there. And when I was talking to the DOT folks over the last couple of weeks, there's a tier 1 and tier 2 program that has funding available for projects like this. And I'm not asking the city manager, the intent here is not to ask the city manager to sign a deal on all this stuff, but at least begin formally talks with DOT to kind of figure out what DOT is willing to part with and Steve has the position of what the borough is trying to do, whether we're trying to design docks or, I think eventually we'll come up with some type of resolutions about those 3 docks. That's going to happen. And I don't think this weakens our position at all. I think this lets the state know that, yeah, we're thinking about this, and while we haven't signed off on it, this is a good time. We've had the conversation been put on hold for the last 15 months, and this is a good time to start that conversation up. So yeah, I support this. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have input?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Norheim?
It's kind of a question, I guess, more. Do we know if say we did this and we acquired these 3 areas, the entrance island dock, which is indeed sinking. When I go in there I choose to anchor instead of tying to it. I don't view it as safe. Does that dock need to stay there, or could we just go out there, cut the dock off, and then, I don't know, put it on the beach somewhere and just leave the piling and say, hey, we took care of it? Or do we have to go in and maintenance the dock and actually maintain it as a dock?
Well, during the negotiations with the state, the deal was you take all 3 or you don't get any. And originally there was going to be a little bit of money that came with it, but not enough to do maintenance on any of the facilities. And that would, we could do whatever we want with it if we take ownership, but I would, not want to take ownership of the entrance island dock. I'd like the state to remove it and be responsible for any of the littering or garbage or damage that takes place. So that's what took place there. And yeah, anyway, it's not usable. And from what I've heard, I haven't been there in probably a decade, but I heard you have to wear your extra tufts if you want to get off to tie your boat up. So I don't even know if I'd tie my boat up to it. Member Kinsinger?
Yes, I understand what Bob's trying to say and what he's trying to get across, and I also, but I agree with Jeff. I don't think I think it's safe to say, if we called up the state and said, hey, we'd like to take ownership of Papke, Kupernoff, and Entrance Island, they would say, yes, where do we sign? It's not going to be something that they want to retain ownership with. What we need to negotiate with the state is how we can leverage to get enough money to either remove the Entrance Island facility and upgrade the Kupernoff dock and the Papke dock. And I think we're in the process of evaluating that right now, and I think we need to continue down that track. So I don't see the problem in having the manager contact DOT and say, hey, look, we're looking at this again. We're working on some plans and proposals. We just want to keep you in the loop. Do you have any more feedback? We don't have anything on the table. If they want to come back and they want to say, give us your plans and we'll fund it 100%, then I would say hallelujah. But that's not going to happen. So I think we should proceed and just have the manager notify DOT, tell them what we're doing, what our intentions are, what we'd like to do in the future, and just leave it there.
Any other input? Member Tremblay?
There's a lot of moving parts, and so for this, to me, it feels a little premature to be voting honestly either yay or nay. Today, I would prefer that we delay the conversation until after we see the results from what we have already asked to happen as far as getting diagrams and that kind of stuff. So that would be my preference.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, in response to delaying the conversation, I mean, I think the conversation is going to happen anyway, one way or the other. And I'm not asking for us to have a negotiation strategy right now, but I think it's time for Steve to kind of just call him up and let him know that we want to start the negotiations and the discussions. In my casual conversation with folks at DOT, they realize that the Entrance Island dock is a liability. And if the borough doesn't want to deal with it, it sounded to me like they are ready to deal with it, which means to me, remove it, because they understand it's a state facility that's a liability. And I think that, I don't know why we would need to delay the conversation. I mean, I don't expect Steve to get out of this meeting and go over and talk to DOT immediately, but I think that we've kind of put things on pause for the last year and a half, and all we're trying to do is start the conversation again. This will be back before us many times, but I think it's time to ask Steve, give Steve direction to start the negotiations. So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other input?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Norham?
I'm kind of seeing where this is going, and if I'm correct, we could vote for Steve to do this and just talk to the state, but I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page that none of us want anything to do with the Entrance Island dock. It is sinking. I was there last year. It's a liability, and it sounds like the state also agrees that it's a liability. So I'm not really seeing the problem with having Steve call and say, hey, we're interested in these other two places and we'll take Entrance Island, but you need to get rid of it or fix it first. And if they don't go for it, then that's it. Short negotiations.
Okay, any other input? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
No.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
No.
Mark, Bob, David,
Yes. It fails on a 3-3 vote. So sale of borough parcel number 1-003-521 located at 306 Sandy Beach Road. On August 23rd, 2021, parcel 01-03-521 was auctioned by sealed bid. There were two bidders for the property, with the highest bid submitted by Chad Villamore in the amount of $71,099. Borough Code section 16-12-100 provides for assembly approval of the highest bid and subsequent sale. I'd entertain a motion to approve this amount for the bid for this property.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Stanton Gregor. So clerk call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes,
Bernard, oh, there you are.
sorry.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jay, Mark,
Yes. Back here. Sounds like that passed unanimously for that auction. And item F, sale of Borough parcel 03-210-3110 located on Kupernoff Island. On August 23rd, 2021, this parcel was auctioned by sealed bid. There were 4 bidders for the property with the highest bid submitted by Rick Braun in the amount of $15,001. So same thing with the Borough Code. It needs Borough Assembly. I'd entertain a motion to approve this sale.
So move.
Second.
Clerk call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes,
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes. Piece of property, that sale is approved as well. And the third one today we're gonna look at is parcel 03-213-040. It's located on Kupernoff. It was auctioned by sealed bid. There were 2 bidders for the property with the highest bid submitted by Max D. Krasky or Krasky, I guess, in the amount of $18,500. Clerk call the roll to approve this bid.
oh, we need a motion.
So moved.
Motion, sorry.
Second.
Don't get ahead of myself. Okay, motion been made by member Stanton Gregor, seconded by member Mucci. All those in favor, or call the roll. Time to take a break.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Sorry.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay, Taylor,
yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, all 3 of those auctions have been approved. And that brings us to item 16, communications. And there is a list of correspondence received by the Borough and the Assembly, received until since August 11th. And that is on the website. We don't go through them as an assembly. And so if people want to look at them, they just go to the website and go to item 16A. 17, assembly discussion items. And that's when member Tremblay wanted to do your discussion on community housing.
Yes, please. Thank you. So a little bit of background. In the before time, February 2020, we as an assembly voted on our 5 priorities for the manager with regards to economic development priorities for the borough. And housing was one of those top 5. And that was in coordination with PEDC. So basically, that long ago, we were talking about housing as a priority for us and for the general community. And then a couple meetings ago, member Mucci brought up the topic of the need of housing in the community. And in discussion, it seemed like it was a general consensus, yes, we understand. So I go to Share Coalition meetings whenever I can. So I brought that topic of conversation to the Share Coalition meetings, and I asked who would be interested to join me for a conversation to get into details on housing needs as they see in their respective groups. So I had a few of those interested members join myself and Borough Manager Giesbrecht for a meeting. So I provided a written report, but I'm going to break it down a little bit. So present was myself, Annette Bennett with WAVE, also Humanity in Progress, Manager Steve Giesbrecht, Savan Guthrie. Savan Guthrie is with the Petersburg Indian Association in the role of Housing and Commercial Property Manager. We also had Alex Helms, Ashley Kawashima, representing both HIP as well as Ashley's role with PMC as a behavioral health clinician. So it kind of, so we got into 3 main categories of housing that we identified as basic needs. And so one is basic need, and that's a safe place for those currently experiencing homelessness. And I made a mistake in the written report. There's currently about 20 people in Petersburg experiencing active homelessness and about 100 people in a state of consistent housing insecurity. And this is a growing problem, not a shrinking problem. So the less we talk about it, actually the worse it kind of gets. And so that also includes a need for transitional housing and treatment facility options, which we do not have in town. And waiting lists for outside communities are months in need. So that was basic need. And then there's introductory need. That's just getting a basic apartment. That's also first-time home buyers or people needing extensive renovation assistance if they want to stay in a home that's currently actively falling down. This also goes into the an issue that they noted. Right now, Section 8 vouchers, people who receive those can't find a place that accepts them. So it can be a real tough moment when people who have been waiting for that voucher and need for a long time get it, only to discover it doesn't actually help them in achieving that housing. And then there was the basic need of general home availability for families, for individual people, like we're talking basic apartments, as well as land for development for people who have ideas, just opening up more land, which we as a borough have. So those were things that we identified as a need. And this was just my own report. I sent it to the group this morning, so I didn't get too much time for active feedback. So if people give me corrections about what they experienced at the meeting, I'm going to report that back to this group. But the reason I did that is that none of us are ourselves experts on this topic. And so I'm going to be continuing outreach to people who are those experts on the topic to bring it back to us. And hopefully eventually we can get to some form of resolutions, because right now, let's take the active homelessness experience for people in the community. There aren't many, you can't really exist in a public space if you don't have a home. There aren't many places for you to go. So people basically find themselves being chased from place to place because they need a place to sleep and they don't know where to go for that answer. And we right now as a community don't have answers for that. And so hopefully just by continuing to have the conversations, we can start to come to community solutions and have broad awareness of what the needs are. And a lot of the interest for the members of the committee that kind of assembled for the sake of this meeting, these are folks that this isn't what they set out to do for their jobs. This isn't necessarily the intended, like they thought they'd be able to do their job about this one thing. I'm going to take behavioral health. But it turns out it's actually really hard. And Jay, here you can intercept me if I'm wrong on this. You have a hard time prioritizing your emotional or mental health if you don't have a place to sleep and you aren't getting enough food. And so people are having to mission creep their jobs into helping meet those needs first before they can actually help people recover from substance abuse, recover with mental health issues. And I also, one thing that came up in conversation is that there's a general misunderstanding that the majority of folks that we talk about in this population are experiencing substance or mental health abuse, and that's not true. People who are working are having a hard time meeting their housing needs. People who are active community members find themselves in state of housing instability. And I think that we can find answers. It's just gonna take a team. So future conversations that I'm planning to have with people, and anyone on the assembly is welcome to join me. I'm planning on meeting with the police chief about the amount of time and resources that they're spending on these topics. I'm hoping to meet with representatives from the real estate community because this is an issue that we're kind of downstream of a lot of big trends. 1 in 5 houses on the broader American market are being purchased by investment firms, which if we don't think that that's impacting who's looking to buy houses here, then we're not paying attention. So figuring out how to meet the needs of the community in a way that meet the needs of the market as well is going to be something to think about. And then this is just a general invitation to members of the community. If they are hearing this and they have housing ideas or they want to talk about what their ideas are, I want to hear them. And so they can email me. Visit ctremblay@petersburgak.gov. I don't usually say it out loud. So, okay, so I think that's the general report, and I'm open to discussion, feedback, questions, and Steve was there as well. So if I missed anything that stuck out to you, please let me know.
Before we go, I think we need to be, I'm glad you're looking into this. It is a problem, but I think we need to be careful getting assembly members. 1 is good, or 2, but when we start communicating amongst ourselves, like your email you sent out, if you want answers from the assembly, if it's something we're gonna take action on in the future, we have to be careful we're not discussing it outside an open meeting. So just, I mean, I think that could potentially be an issue, but I think the discussion needs to go forward. Member Stanton Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No real questions right now, Member Tremblay. Just wanted to thank you for bringing this formal discussion item before us, and I look forward to being a part of the dialogue moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Member Tremblay. I think this is a really important item. I think it's a really important item for the economy in our community right now because if you take a look in the paper, there's a whole lot of jobs that are open right now. The borough has a lot of jobs that are open right now. The hospital has a lot of jobs open right now. And these aren't the $90,000 to $120,000 a year jobs that are open, but they're people that are making a whole lot of money every year. And we have a big lack of affordable housing in this community right now. And if we don't address the housing issue in this town, all of us better start thinking about taking a second job here because we're going to need to pitch in if we want to have everybody fed at the hospital, if we want to have our old folks taken care of. We need to take a look at this. And this is a problem not just in our community here. It's at a critical point in a couple other communities in Southeast Alaska. And it's taken many years for them to address this problem. And in that time period, the problem has magnified and gotten worse. So I think it's good that we're ahead of the curve, or maybe at least partway in the curve right now. And so I think we need to make this a priority of the community to address this problem.
Any other input or in this conversation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Norheim?
Yeah, I was just, I agree with what Member Tremblay said, especially about the investment firms buying up houses down south. That is absolutely true, and it's a real problem. Luckily, they haven't seemed to be looking at Alaska yet. I believe, personal responsibility and all that stuff, that we can do something on the assembly, sure. And I don't think that we shouldn't. But for just like the people listening right now, if you are selling your house at, say, probably way more than what you bought it for, I understand costs of things increase and whatnot, but you're also selling it to somebody as a vacation home and not supporting your community, not saying you have to, but when you look at the problem, this particular problem, doing things like that is contributing to that problem and making it worse. I think this issue is a lot more complicated than something that can really be done on a local level. And again, not saying you should, well, you guys, I'm not running again, not saying that you shouldn't try, absolutely try something, but the individual at home thinking of selling your house, maybe consider making sure that it is somebody in town buying it who does plan on living here. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this topic? Okay, thank you, Chelsea, for bringing that forward. Any other assembly members have comments today? Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, just a brief one. It is, as you touched on in the mayor's report, it is a democracy time in Petersburg again. The election of October 5th is coming fast, and there's many contested seats for different offices. Again, as you mentioned, early voting starts September 15th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. downstairs in the Borough building in the training office. I encourage everyone to vote early. You get a really nice sticker, and you get to say I voted earlier, and I would take it a step further. I really firmly believe it. It's not just our right in the democracy. I think it's our responsibility to postpone it, to participate in elections. So please vote from September 5th on, and if you can't, and early voting doesn't work, October 5th, Tuesday is a great day to vote. Thanks.
Member Nucci, you have a comment.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, I guess, for the city clerk. Can you explain to me the guidelines for a write-in candidate? Like if there's a deadline and they file a
Certainly.
petition and
Yes.
just the whole process?
To be a write-in candidate, you just have to get a form from the clerk's office and fill it out and sign the municipal exemption statement unless you plan on spending more than $5,000 on your campaign. You do not need to gather any signatures, and your form to be a write-in candidate must be filed with the clerk's office by 4:30 PM Friday, October 1st.
Cool. So you do not need to gather signatures of support.
That is correct. But there are no write-in candidates for assembly or mayor.
Okay. All right, any other assembly member comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Bernard.
I just wanted to say, absolutely, all the fishermen who are always missing your voting, early voting, that's you guys. I cannot say the number of times that the fishermen on the dock will say, oh, I should have went and voted. Oh, I should have did the early voting. That's right now. Or get your stuff in order, guys. I know you're going to be out crabbing, but you should take care of that. Also, if you're thinking about joining the fire department, we would love to have you up there. I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't have the time for it. Well, I don't really have the time for it either, but I'm there every second I can. This has been a little bit of a drag for me, but you know, I still do it every chance I get. It's a lot of fun, and we could definitely use the help. The same with EMS, especially EMS, I should say. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and it's not happening right now. I believe it's September 15th is when the first day for absentee voting is downstairs in the police training room. So, yeah, definitely participate in the election. Everybody get out and vote, do your civic duty. Any other assembly member comments? Any assembly members have recognitions or any staff have recognitions? Seeing none. And so we've already had the community housing discussion, I believe. And before we make a motion to adjourn into executive session, and maybe we can do that now and then we'll take a 5-minute break, 10-minute break, 5 minutes. So I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss the status of the collective bargaining agreement with the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association.
So moved. Second.
So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we will be coming back into the regular meeting to consider the approval of the collective bargaining agreement. So we'll have to come back in the regular session. So for now, let's reconvene at 2 o'clock in executive session.
Yes. The feedback drives me nuts. by
I
the way.
know.
Just to go on a record, it drives me nuts.
It's bad.
Like, I'm gonna just start calling in just to avoid it.
You have to pay $100 grand to get those.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so wait for Carl. No.
All clear?
Okay, we're back in regular session after executive session to discuss the collective bargaining agreement with the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association. And item 19 on today's agenda is ratification of the PMEA collective bargaining agreement. And I would entertain a motion to approve the bargaining agreement that has been put forward.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Tremblay. Is there any discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to this contract that we're about to vote on, I think it was a long struggle to get to where we are. I wanted to thank the borough team member of Steve Giesbrick, Debbie Thompson, Jody Tao, and Carl Hagerman. But I also want to shout out to the union members who were on that negotiating team of Martin Odegaard, Blake Biot, Justin Haley, and Joe Bertignoli. I had an opportunity to sit in on a little bit of it, and it was interesting hearing some of the aspects of what was important to people. And like somebody said at an earlier time, that we spent $17,000 on a wage study back in 2020 to help make up for some of the disparities in the wages. And I think this is the first step to help out. I think the borough, quite honestly, has done a really good job of being fiscally sound. We've realized savings in the past several years that have put us in a position of envy to other communities in Southeast. And I think this is a very good contract for both the borough, and it's a pretty good contract for the borough employees. And I will be voting in favor of this. And I just want to thank everybody who was involved in the process.
Any other comments? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff.
Okay, the negotiations passes unanimously, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Say aye.
Aye.